early and you pay 20, go see the people at the front. They'll cut you 10 bucks. The reason we did that is because one of our speakers, Dr. Paul Alexander, had a family emergency today back at home, and unfortunately won't be here till tomorrow. So that's why we did that. But Dr. Mackis is still here. And my good friend Bob is still here. So we'll get the show rolling. So me and Bob decided earlier today, after the situation with Dr. Alexander, myself and Bob are both pretty invested in politics. So we thought we would sit down and have a little discussion about politics, because that's what's got us into the mess we're in. And it's really important that, you know, people like myself and Bob and others that commit so much time and energy to this, that we inspire others to get involved. We've abdicated our responsibility for decades to people we thought had our best interest at heart. Turns out they don't. So now it's up to us to re-engage, take back the responsibility of holding our elected officials accountable. So that's what we're hoping to inspire with this event and obviously many others that we're going to be doing in the future. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend Bob Blayone. Bob's a member of Archer Pulowski's party, the Independence Party of Alberta.
Yeah.
Interesting, I still have Albertans message me from time to time asking me what's the alternative to Danielle Smith in the UCP, and I said, well, it's obvious. You have Archer Pulowski, who's gone to jail numerous times for only telling the truth, for standing on the truth, and not being afraid of speaking the truth, wherever that might be. That's the obvious choice in Alberta, in my mind. If I was there, that's who I'd be supporting. And so it seems to me that would be the obvious place for a lot of people in the freedom movement would cast their support and their vote. You have an election coming up at the end of May, do you know? Or at least that's the idea.
I hope so. Let's see what happens.
There is, Danielle Smith, I guess, is leaning towards calling an election. It's supposed to be held at the end of May, but unfortunately, she has the right to extend the election for another year even. So they may not even go to the polls, depending on what happens in the interim. I guess it probably depends on polling numbers and how they're polling. But my hope, of course, is very similar to what my hope is for Saskatchewan, that the Buffalo Party that I'm associated with, I don't think within the next year and a half we're going to gain enough support to win government outright. But I think we can gain enough support early that we can get some seats into the legislature and have some people telling the truth.
Yeah.
And actually providing opposition to what we have there now, which we have no opposition. And one of the things that I think we need to highlight in all of this is there's a whole group of people in this province, in Alberta, and in every province across the country that have not had representation in government at all. None of you people that are within the freedom movement have had representation. There's nobody speaking for you. We demanded through the last 3 years that there be a debate. Let's put some doctors on a stage and let's have a public debate about locking us all down and forcing our kids to wear masks for 8 hours a day in school. Let's have that debate. Let's have that discussion and see where it goes. Never happened. Never happened. So we need to have this. We need to get some seats in the ledge. Alberta needs to get some seats. I've spoken to a gentleman by the name of Kevin Friesen, leader of the Keystone Party in Manitoba. We're making headway there. We're having some fruitful discussions. There's some activity happening with the Conservative Party of British Columbia. The Ontario Populist Party of Ontario is on board with what we're doing, and we share a lot of the same values. There's movement in Quebec, believe it or not, surrounding this declaration that me and Bob have been talking about for the last few weeks. And so there's hope. There's a lot of hope. These last 3 years have really shown us that our charter isn't worth the paper it's written on. That's one of the big takeaways from this last 3 years. The reason I say that, and I'll use my own example, I've been ticketed 11 times, and through that process, it's been made clear to me, see, under the charter, under section 1, governments, provincial governments, the federal government, is obligated to justify their decision to limit our charter rights. Not one government in this country, provincially or federally, has done that. Not one. Demonstrably justify limiting our rights under the charter. They're compelled and obligated to do this. They haven't done it. And why haven't they done it? Because we had, in 1867, we had our act, the B&A Act, the British North America Act, given to us by the British system, which in turn makes the federal parliament and the provincial governments sovereign and supreme in this country. Not you, not the people. And that's why our courts are ruling in favor of the government. We had the Court of King's Bench here in Saskatchewan actually rule and completely dismiss and ignore Section 1 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that the government doesn't have to justify, or demonstrably justify, limiting our rights and freedoms. The Court of Queen's Bench actually ruled that, completely ignoring the Charter. And why can they do that? Because government is supreme and sovereign in this country. That's why we need change. And for the first time in history, there's a party here in Saskatchewan, the Buffalo Party, that is taking initial steps to initiate that process. And that's through amending our Constitution. Firstly, to amend the preamble. Under the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and then we add 7 words. And those 7 words are derived by the will of the people. Our charter has never represented the people. It never speaks of the people. It only speaks of the parliament. It only speaks of the supremacy and sovereignty of the parliament and the provincial governments. Never in our Constitution has it ever said, we the people. And so we look to amend the Constitution through this process, and the provinces have to initiate this. Part of the amending formula is we need 7 provinces at 50% support. I think we can get there with a concerted effort. We're also looking at, in addition to adding inalienable rights, God-given inalienable rights, that we don't have right now. We don't have those rights, which is why the government was able to lock us down, take away our livelihoods, force mandates on children to wear masks for 8 hours a day in school. Because our charter doesn't reflect the will of the people. Our charter was handed to us by the British system and puts all the power into Parliament and provincial governments, with Section 1 and Section 33. So along with adding those 7 words to the preamble, we also want to repeal Section 1 and Section 33.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a constitution for we the people, clearly defined.
Well, thanks for being here this evening, and it's been a pleasure and an honor getting to know Mark and individuals like Dr. Mackis, true leaders of the day that stand with the people. I think it's important if I tell a little bit about myself. Why am I here in Saskatchewan? Why did I get involved in politics? I do have connections here to Saskatchewan. My great-grandfather, Thomas Kelly, was one of the first 2 settlers of Belcaris, and my father and grandfather were grain farmers there for decades. I come from a large family, 9. All of us were born in different towns across Western Canada. I also have deep Native Indian ancestral ties. My 4th great grandfather being Chief Black Powder, and my 3rd great uncle, Chief Big Bear, the last holdouts to the signing of Treaty 6. I say this, I'm involved in an independence party, and I'll tell you why that is. But I love Canada as well, and I make that a statement. It's a personal statement I make all the time. I understand now what Quebec was doing with their referendums, and how powerful that was, how unifying that was for the people to stand together and push back on the government, on the politicians. My wife and I, so I was born in Tabor and we lived in Raymond until I was a young boy. My dad moved us north to Peace River. And I had a humble upbringing there. We learned how to work hard and literally to survive. And so I was happy to experience that upbringing. And it was through Alberta Oil, that lifted myself up and my brothers and sisters. And my wife and I, we ran a successful oil and gas service company, supplying drill bits to northern rigs for decades. And I was frustrated through those decades that our Alberta oil industry and gas industry were under attack. And it was very frustrating to see that. And so when we decided to shut that down at the end of 2014, for 10 different reasons, one being another downturn was coming, I had seen so many pipeline projects come and go. One very frustrating was the Eagle Spirit Energy Pipeline Corridor. And it was funded by private equity, 50-50, private partnership funding. And it had 24 nations along its route signed up from Fort McMurray to Prince Rupert, north of Prince Rupert, plus hundreds more across Canada. I have friends in northern Alberta on the First Nation communities, and they're very frustrated. They're waiting for their opportunities also. And that's why I got involved. And I got involved in the PC party just as Kenny was coming to Alberta. I did support him. I committed my full time and energy to that volunteering. Even today, I've never taken a penny in doing what we're doing. All of us at the Independence Party are volunteers, and that's what I saw in a couple projects I was involved in. Mark's been involved in politics a lot longer than I have. But in getting involved in UCP, so it became the UCP Party, United Conservative Party. And even before COVID began, I was calling out the stealing of our money, and that's what they're doing. That the lobbyists are controlling our politicians, there's no question, and that's across Canada. So I walked away, and then COVID began, and that's when I really got upset. My family was shattered through this. I have 40-some nieces and nephews, and my older siblings do not appreciate my stance on that, but I started following the science of John Ioannidis. When I wanted to learn about something, I was not shy. I didn't reach out to John, but I started following him. And then I got connected with Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, and through Dr. Hodgkinson, I was able to connect with individuals like Dr. Paul Alexander and Dr. Peter McCullough. And, Mark and I were just involved in a conversation yesterday with former Premier of Newfoundland, Brian Peckford, the last living architect of the Charter Rights and Freedoms. It was an amazing conversation. I'm all about conversation. I think we deserve to have the conversation about COVID. We need to finish that conversation. We need to have a conversation about climate change. Because I promise you, in Alberta, We are done with that fraud, that taxpayer-funded fraud needs to stop. So, in being involved in the UCP, I had behind-the-scenes access. Not that I care about rubbing shoulders with politicians, but my MLA was a 6-year staffer under Kenny when Kenny was in Ottawa. And I learned a lot. It was a great education in what happens behind the scenes. And it's not good at all. I've learned who the lobbyists are to these politicians. I ran against Daniel Smith in the Brooks Medicine Net by-election. Never in a million years would I thought I'd be up here speaking to people doing this. But my wife and I both dedicated our lives to this movement of people. And I hope to inspire more people, as Mark says, to stand together. Because as Brian Peckford said in a speech last year in Calgary, the first time I met him in person, it went this way. All parties and politicians across Canada have turned their backs on the people. The media and justice system has also turned their backs on the people. The lobbyists are controlling our politicians, and it's in the only hope is in the people themselves. I had put a meeting together on November 10th, 2021, with Dr. Paul Alexander, Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, and Dr. Peter McCullough had to cancel last minute, but we were hoping for follow-up meetings. 10 Alberta UCP MLAs met with these men. 132 peer-reviewed studies at the time. I was contacted the next day, and I had all this in emails and texts and evidence. I had a witness in that meeting, a lawyer, friend of mine, Catherine Qualichuk. And I was told that Shane Getson, the UCP MLA of Lac St. Anne, was to table the research in the legislature. Once it was tabled, it would become source documents and would open up the conversation. That's one of the purposes of Dr. Alexander coming here. He's very proud of us out west for how we stood together and how we stood up and how we educated ourselves and took a stand against these political betrayers that have committed genocide. And I'm not shy to say that, in treason, with this UN agenda that Mark speaks to. And I promise you this, our UCP government is actively involved in bringing that to our province in Alberta. There's an organization called Forte, Funding of Opportunities for Return to Employment. Here's a quote, this is their role. To train citizens to transition away from unsustainable industries, such as coal mining, beef farming they call it, logging, and oil and gas. At the same time they've been working with our government in Alberta, they've been working with the Trudeau government. Just Transition is the rebrand. So Mark, I don't think I need to get into those details, but I promise you there's connections in Alberta that run very deep to the World Economic Forum. And I didn't know any of this when I walked away from them. I didn't know about this agenda. I learned where our chief of staff, the former chief of staff to Kenny, came from, out of New York City, another global lobby organization. Vice President from 2010 to 2015. On the board of directors, former campaign manager for Barack Obama, the former campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, the Democrat National Committee chairman, and this individual, Joseph Stiglitz, the former top economic advisor to President Bill Clinton, who was with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, and the WF since 1995. He was, I call him an architect of the Green New Deal, then was rebranded to the Great Reset, and now it's called Just Transition. Our politicians are talking that way now, just transition. So, I'm involved, as Mark is, for the good of the people. And I stand with you all. This conversation for me reaches across Canada. Our hope is, like Mark, to get a minimum of caucus in Alberta, to have a true opposition to this, because the NDP and the UCP are aligned in this. They are aligned in it. I am running in Camrose, Alberta, and I promise you, when I travel around, there is a great awakening at hand. People know of this treason, and we just need to believe in one another again and stand together. We do have a commitment to a referendum because I've learned of the power of that, and that is our fallback. That is it. As people, we stand together and we have that referendum card in our hand, and that's the only thing that'll get Ottawa back at the table. So we're committed to that in Alberta, but we'll be cheering on all of Canada as every province works towards their own solutions. Northern BC is joining us in this conversation, and the declaration that Mark's going to read tonight, I'll be reading at our AGM on April 1st also. And we'll start the discussion of how we need to cheer one another on and get behind one another. So thank you, everyone.
Again, it is the people. The people have to start dictating to our politicians what they're going to do for us. Not them telling us what they're going to do for us. We have to tell them. They work for us. They're employed by us. They're there to serve the people. This idea, they're trying to flip the script on us. This idea that my health privacy is any of their business, or the federal government for that matter, is upside down. They serve me, the taxpayer. My privacy, my information is mine. I'm a private citizen, not a public servant. I need to know everything they're doing. They don't need to know everything I'm doing. We need to flip this back to where it belongs. And so, I've said for a long time that I'm encouraged because I think I have a good sense of the spirit of humanity and what that represents. I'm going to give you an example of Saskatchewan and the people of this province. How we dictated to our premier and our ruling party during the last 3 years. So as the convoy is moving toward Ottawa, everyone sort of attributed that to Scott Moe being the first premier to announce the lifting of the mandates and restrictions. But there was something else that was happening at exactly the same time. Somebody contacted me from inside the Sask Party and told me that they received only 10% of the donations they would normally have had at that point in time of the year, previous years. Now, Scott Moe and the Sask Party's base is rural. Rural Saskatchewan said to Scott Moe, "We're done with your tyranny. We're finished. We're not supporting this anymore." That's why Scott Moe announced the lifting of the mandates and the restrictions. The next day, Jason Kenney over in Alberta announced that he was lifting the mandates and restrictions, but he moved it up a little ways to be better than Scott Moe. That's how politics works. And then the rest of the dominoes fell across the country. So it was this little province of Saskatchewan within this confederation that got that ball rolling. So give yourselves a hand. And that's exactly what it's going to take back our country and to take back our province. It's going to be the will of the people. And we have to inspire people to get involved again and to understand the issues and to get involved in the 10 town hall events and come together and unite around the values that are under attack. And those values, I've yet to meet a Canadian that doesn't share these values. And those values are freedom, liberty, sovereignty, justice, equality under the law, the rule of law, prosperity, and truth. It's those values in particular that are under attack. They must destroy those values, the values of Western civilization, the best civilization humanity has ever known. They need to destroy those values in order to achieve the goals of sustainable development. It's a prerequisite. Which is why they're doing all of the things they're doing, which is why everything we see is upside down, inside out, and backwards. So our hope, obviously through this experience and through touring, is that we inspire people to get involved, to stand up, to take back your responsibility so we can take back our country and our provinces. It's essential. We have to do this. And one of the ways we're going to do this, again, is through amending a constitution, as I said before, that's never represented the people. It's always put the supremacy and sovereignty in the hands of Parliament. So one of the ways we're going to do this politically, and it has to be done through the provinces, is the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan has adopted this True North Declaration and is going to be asking its members April 1st and 2nd at our AGM to vote in favor of this declaration so we can put it into policy and we can encourage other provinces, other parties like Bob. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the injustice of the day.
Yep.
Before I read that.
Yep.
And so you probably heard of what's happening in Alberta with the 4 Alberta Coots political prisoners.
Yeah.
They've been in prison over 400 days now, and I've met the men, and it is absolutely tragic and heartbreaking what's happened to them and their families. It is disgusting, to be honest with you. That's a strong word, but there's no other word for it. No due process. I guess innocent until proven guilty does not apply in this country anymore. There was lies told, and I'll say that boldly. James Sowery, who's in court right now, he was a back truck hauler that ran over a pylon. A pylon, he's in court now. Over a pylon. Our leader, Pastor Arthur Pawlowski, gave a sermon in Coots. The highways were open. He gave a peaceful speech. And he's facing 10.5 years in prison. The ruling is coming on May 1st and 2nd. The Crown Prosecutor, Stephen Johnson, who's also the Crown Prosecutor of those 4 men in James. Arthur was wearing his Solidarity sweatshirt, the Solidarity Polish movement, right? It's a very important movement in Poland that freed people over there. And he likened that, the Crown Prosecutor likened that to inciting genocide, comparing it to a Rwanda genocide. That's who's the Crown Prosecutors in our province. Derek Reimer, Pastor Reimer, is in prison right now for protesting the Drag Queen Story Hour. So we went to the Calgary City Hall. I was the one doing the mediating with the head of security, and Archer was by the door, ready to go outside. We told him we're going outside, and they gave Archer a 30-day trespass. They targeted him. And then we went outside to the other entrance that was locked, and we had our press conference, and the Calgary police came over, and they gave him a year trespass. Incited people. That's what's going on in Alberta. So, you know, the justice system is broken, 100% broken. Completely. And the only way we're going to change that is by standing together, putting pressure on them, advocating for these men that are in prison, standing with them, and just sharing their story out. So that's another reason why Dr. Alexander, he's very passionate about that as well. He was arguing the science of Michael Jackson, that was in prison for the father that refused to vaccinate his daughter, and he was charged with kidnapping. There's another man who knew the risk he was taking, but he did it for his daughter. We need more courage today, more leaders standing up together. So I just wanted to share that with you, and pray for those men and speak out for them. Thank you.
So again, what we've seen over the last 3 years has really exposed our justice system. It's exposed our Constitution. It's exposed our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. that they're literally not worth the paper they're written on. That needs to change. And we're in the process of moving forward in making and creating that change. But we're going to need your help to do it. That's why this, inspired by so many freedom fighters across this country that were ticketed, pastors thrown in jail, churches surrounded by fencing, a convoy, a peaceful protest in Ottawa, one of Canada's most significant protesters in the history of our country, was ended by an emergency act that was called that was unnecessary, and the protest was bludgeoned out of existence by tyrants. So we need to change things. It's going to be up to the people to do that. Individual by the name of Brenton Froelich out of Beachland, British Columbia, took a lot of time to develop this declaration, along with the help of my good friend Professor Salim Mansour. And they whittled it down to what it is now. It started with 15 pages. It's now 4. So I'd like to read it to you. And I want you to take away from this some inspiration, because it's pretty inspiring. The first time I read this thing, I was sitting in my hotel room and Selena sent it to me. I choked up because it really meant that much. And then the morning that I read it to Bob and his wife and Celine and others at the table, again I got choked up as I was reading it. Because to me it resonates so much with me and our experience in the last 3 years. So keep that in mind when I read this to you. I better put my glasses on for this. This is the unanimous declaration of the true North, Canada's freedom nation. Recent events in our nation's history have confirmed to the citizens from coast to coast to coast that Canada is broken. Since Confederation, most Canadians believed that the government respected God-given rights and freedoms, and that the tyranny which reigned in faraway places would never find its way to our shores. And it did. In fact, this isn't the first time that an Emergencies Act was declared in this country. In 1970, it was declared by Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, restricting your rights once again. But if we are truthful in recollecting our history, over the past 30 years there have been many signs and many warnings. A little loss of freedom here, a little less liberty there, and all the while the true North being bullied and coddled into the cage of totalitarian state in the making. The Freedom Convoy was the last canary in the coal mine. The thousands who joined in Ottawa asking our Prime Minister to lift the mandates that abridged their rights and freedoms were no fringe minority. They were instead true patriots, representing millions of Canadians who had been witnessing the true North strong and free being toppled like a statue, replaced with a pillar of tyranny and despotism. For generations, it was simply assumed that our rights and freedoms were protected in our Constitution. But sadly, this assumption was mistaken, since in fact Canadians have been subject to a great charade. This charade masks the truth that government considers our natural rights and liberties not inalienable, but merely privileges granted by Parliament under the Crown that can readily be withdrawn at the whim of government. Indeed, our Bill of Rights from 1960 recognized many liberties, but could be amended or repealed by Parliament at any time. proving that the rights purportedly recognized in the bill were in fact privileges and not rights at all. This truth was confirmed when Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act in 1970 and suspended the rights and freedoms of Canadians. While our Bill of Rights had a brief pretense of liberty, it birthed the Charter of Rights and Freedoms entrenched in our Constitution Act of 1982 to safeguard our liberties from the whims of Parliament. The charade of Canadian liberty ended when the Freedom Convoy 2022 was bludgeoned by Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act. His use of violence to crush the Freedom Convoy proved yet again that Parliament is sovereign, and that, as with our Bill of Rights, the Charter is simply political sleight of hand. While the Charter proclaims our rights and freedoms, Section 1 and 33 guarantee the supremacy of Parliament to limit those freedoms as government determines, confirming that the Charter is about privileges and not rights. And thus, the fundamental flaw in our Constitution lies exposed. Drafted by Great Britain to ensure the Parliament's sovereignty over Canadians and to serve the interests of the British Empire. That's our Constitution. It contains no recognition to the inalienable rights of Canadians. Rather, a cursory look to the past proves that for generations, government has used the Constitution to abuse Canadians. The Indian Act, the internment of Ukrainian Canadians during World War I, the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II, forced sterilizations, the MK Ultra experiments, the Crow's Nest freight rates, the National Energy Program, ideological-driven gun control, and a Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's campaign to destroy the natural resource economies of Western Canada. Recent examples, continued abuses by government against the people of Canada include closing our economies, prohibiting us from tending to loved ones who are sick or dying, suspending the order of Parliament, segregating us with vaccine mandates and passports, restricting our travel within Canada, coercing us into taking experimental vaccines against our will, firing and fining us for refusing to comply with COVID mandates, refusing to acknowledge adverse vaccine effects and injury, censoring free speech regarding vaccines, COVID treatments and policy, and stifling debate, punishment of healthcare professionals for voicing concerns regarding vaccine side effects and treatment options, invoking the Emergencies Act to crush a legal protest with violence, taking political prisoners such as Pastor Archie Pawlowski, Tamara Litch, Chris Barber, and Pat King, freezing bank accounts of Canadians because they supported the Freedom Convoy 2022, stripping our rights to freely own and use arms, censoring free speech, the internet traffic, and criminalizing communication, making lawful medically assisted suicide rather than support people in need, undermining our national sovereignty by supporting illegal migration and the globalist agendas of the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and the World Health Organization, tacitly supporting the efforts and ambitions of the Communist Party of China, creating massive debt, high inflation, and high interest rates, destroying our natural resource and agriculture economies, imposing massive carbon taxes, pursuing total control over our lives, including what we drive, what we eat, what jobs we have, and how to adapt in their imagined future green economy, imposing of a digital currency and digital ID to exert complete control over social, economic, and political lives of all Canadians. It is abundantly clear that our Constitution does not recognize our inalienable rights. What instead Canadians suffer from is the tyranny of Parliament that has the supremacy to suspend those rights, to appoint judges biased in support of Parliament's discretion over charter rights and freedoms, and enable federal usurpation of provincial jurisdictions, continue to repress First Nations under the Indian Act, and impose all Canadians to the lies, deceptions, and corruptions of politicians and their supporting cast of bureaucrats. As such, we Canadians vow to exercise our natural duty and moral obligation to choose the path taken by millions of patriots before us, who stood for freedom in the face of tyranny. From Boudicca fighting for her people from Roman rule over Britannia in 60 AD, the rebel barons who forced King John of England to sign the Magna Carta at Runnymede in 1215. Our honored soldiers storming Juno Beach, Normandy in June of 44. The small protest against the violation of our rights with mask and vaccine mandates that began in our streets in 2020. To the Freedom Convoy in 2022 that sought redress in our nation's capital. Therefore, whereas all people are created equally with naturally endowed inalienable rights and liberties, and whereas the natural authority for the creation and legitimate operation of civil government are derived from the people, and whereas we believe that the fundamental objective of government is to preserve and enlarge the freedom of Canadians through the vigorous defense and protection of our naturally endowed rights. And whereas we believe that the provinces and territories must have distinct and independent constitutions guaranteeing their greatest sovereignty within a confederation. And whereas we desire a constitution that will unite all Canadians in a commonwealth of freedom, equality, and purpose that reserves sovereignty to the Canadian people, where all levels of government are constrained by established limits, clearly defined separation of powers, and separate representation for the peoples and regions of the nation. Therefore, we declare we are the true North, Canada's freedom nation, and we will not surrender Canada to the political elites and their post-nationalist agendas.
Yes.
We believe all people are created equally in the image of God, with inalienable rights and liberties, including the right to life, liberty, and personal property. We believe in the power of loving God and loving our neighbors as ourselves. We will not surrender our God-given rights to any government, and would rather die as free people standing bravely in the face of tyranny than live as serfs beholden to a dictator of this kingdom. I think number 5 is my favorite one. We will hold the line and not comply with any law, order, regulation, mandate, or directive from government that infringes on our inalienable rights and liberties. We will freely exercise our inalienable rights and freedoms, including the right to free speech, the right to self-defense, the right to privacy, the right to practice our faith, the right to freely associate, and the right to personal property. We possess the right of self-determination, and from this strength we will organize a Congress of Canadians from coast to coast to frame a new constitution for the nation, under which sovereign provinces can unite in a federation that will guarantee the rights and liberties of the true North strong and free, to prosper and to endure with the grace and blessings of God. Go ahead, Bob.
I just want to add some names. I have to call their names, the political prisoners that we need to add to that. Chris Carver, Chris Lysak, Tony Olenick, and Jerry Moran are the names of the 4 fathers, husbands, brothers, uncles, and sons. So, thank you.
So, again, that's the declaration that the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan has embraced. We've essentially adopted it. We have to obviously wait until we put it to the members to ratify it. We assume the membership vote during our AGM will be unanimous. And we're also hoping that the Independent Party of Alberta presents it to their AGM and that they also pass it at that time. Again, I've discussed this with people in the BC Conservative Party. I've discussed it with Kevin Friesen with the Keystone Party of Manitoba. I've discussed it with people in the Populist Party of Ontario. And I've discussed it with people in Quebec. People in Quebec are very excited about this.
I love it. Love it.
They're the one province that hasn't signed our Constitution that exists as it in its current form.
Oh.
We're the only smart ones of the bunch.
Yeah.
And why is it that they're getting everything they need on our backs?
Right.
They were the smart ones. We took it. Now it's time to fix that and make this confederation fair for every province.
I hope people across Canada will get behind this declaration. It's a very important moment, I believe, and like the Ottawa convoy that inspired a nation to stand together. This has more of an call to action behind it, and to inspire each province to take a stand and take back their freedom.
Some people might wonder why an independence party would be embracing this declaration. None of what we're saying in this declaration precludes any province's ability to hold a referendum on separation and decide enough's enough. Because here's what has to happen. There's an amending formula that was created in 1982. It's never been used in this country, ever. This is the first time in history that we're looking at using that amending formula. Part of that amending formula, of course, is 7 provinces and 50% support. The second part of that is Parliament has to vote on it. But if we're going to Parliament, and we've established 7 provinces in this country, over 50% support for a declaration to amend the Constitution, and they say no,
We get in our trucks.
they're gone. They're gone. I can't imagine any parliamentarian saying no to 7 provinces at over 50% support for this. Can't imagine. But if they did, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, whoever can hold referendums. And that's the leverage that we must have if we're ever going to get a fair deal in this federation. If Saskatchewan and Alberta have 50 to 60% in their back pocket of people in their provinces prepared to say, I want a divorce because you're not treating us fairly, we're in a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
What are they going to say to that? They're going to say exactly what they said to Quebec. What do you want? And we're going to tell them what we want. We want a new formula for deciding how much money we send to the East.
Yeah.
We want our funds to stay here where we can take care of our people. That doesn't mean we don't share. It just means we want a fair deal. That's all that means. We want fairness in a confederation. We want a confederation that works. And if I have to go to the table and negotiate with Ottawa and tell them that I've got 60% in my back pocket that's ready to go tomorrow, if you say no, we finally have some leverage, which we've never had. Alberta's never had that leverage. We need to have that leverage, and the people have to give it to us. It's up to you. This is about the future of this country. And I'm not a separatist. I was a separatist when I was a teenager. And then Preston Manning created the Reform Party. So I joined that, and then they broke my heart, merging with the Red Tories. And so I'm a patriot. I love this country. Too many people before us sacrificed everything for what we have. Not only our vets, not only our soldiers in the First and Second War, but the people that immigrated to this country and built this province in Alberta and Manitoba. This is not what they envisioned. They did not envision us handing over our rights and freedoms to the government. They left Europe to get away from that, to build something better. And we have to do that. We have to make sure that we protect and defend those values. It's up to us. There's nobody else that's going to do it. It has to be the people.
The power of one is where it starts. Power of one. I need to remind our politicians, I had several of them say to me, what can one man do? Watch us. Watch all of you. Power of one becomes the power of all. And that's what we need to do. We stand together. So I'm with you, Mark. Yeah, we're going to be having conversations across Canada. We're going to get past this provincial election, and no matter how it shakes out, my personal conversation is across Canada. And trying to help other Canadians stand up for themselves, inspire more Canadians to stand together and end this tyranny.
Yes.
Yes.
So, on that note, we have a very special guest here today, Dr. William Mackis, who's really been standing together with doctors like Dr. Hodkinson, Dr. Alexander, Dr. Hoff, and numerous other doctors in this country that have put their reputation on the line to stand for what they believe to be right. And thank you for doing that. We need more like that. Dr. John Wong. Is the other one, Dr. Francis Christian. We have to embrace these people. We have to take them in and stand right beside them when they're fighting this fight and encourage more to stand up. Encourage more to fight for what's right. So, without further ado.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'd like to tell you a little bit about who I am and where I come from. I was born in communist Czechoslovakia, and when I was about 1 year old, my parents took me to a tiny little village, to a tiny little church, where I was baptized in secret at midnight, so the communists wouldn't find out, so that they wouldn't throw my dad in prison. That's sort of how we were baptized in communist countries. I grew up, I remember standing in red lines. Parents would leave me and stand there for hours and hours, and at some point they'd come back and the line would eventually move and we'd get, one or two items of whatever we need, and that was just the life we knew. And then my parents, just before the fall of the Berlin Wall, they packed up and took off, and we applied for refugee status in Yugoslavia to the United Nations. We were put in a refugee camp. That's why I learned English. And then we came to Canada. We were accepted after a year in the refugee camp. Came to Toronto, government housing. My dad got a job at U of T and worked very, very hard for the rest of his working life. Like all immigrants, I worked very hard as well. Try to make my parents proud. And grew up in Toronto. Went to University of Toronto. Did immunology undergrad. Went to McGill University. Did my medical school there. Did my training in radiology and oncology. When I graduated, I moved to Brandon, Manitoba. I worked in the Brandon Regional Health Center, ran a little department there, and then came to Edmonton, Alberta to run a large cancer center. Threw myself into my work, treated cancer patients, end-stage cancer patients with cutting-edge cancer treatments for 2 years. Cured hundreds of cancer patients, diagnosed tens of thousands of cancer patients, until Alberta Health Services decided to shut down my program, get rid of me, drag me out of my cancer program, because, as I didn't know at the time, Justin Trudeau had decided to invest the entire Liberal Party into these cutting-edge cancer treatments with $300 million that they're poured into Vancouver, BC. So I've been fighting Alberta Health Services legally ever since. That's a 7-year battle now, and COVID came, and I saw the same people that had sabotaged me and my family and my cancer patients and left them to die. I saw them doing the same thing with COVID patients, blocking people from being treated properly with early treatments. Then, of course, the vaccines came. They rolled out the vaccines. And they just used every dirty trick in the book to push the vaccines on everybody. And they did it incrementally. They did it a little bit by bit. Get your first dose. Let's get 70% of people. You'll be protected with one dose. I don't know if anybody remembers that. You'll be protected with one dose. Let's just get 70% of people will get herd immunity and we'll be good. Well, you got your one dose. Now you need to get your second dose. Right? Now it's a 2-dose vaccine. Right? So now you need to get your 2 doses. Now, of course, all the healthcare workers have to be vaccinated because they have to protect their patients. People who want to visit loved ones in long-term care homes and hospitals, and so on and so on. And it was just this rock in a boiling pot, and they kept moving the goalposts over and over and over. I started speaking out about COVID vaccines, the dangers of COVID vaccines in about August of 2021. I was inspired by doctors like Dr. Roger Hopkinson, like Dr. Paul Alexander, like Dr. Byron Riddle, Dr. Kalpinder Kaur in Ontario, Dr. Patrick Phillips, Dr. Charles Mount, Dr. Stephen Malthouse, Dr. Daniel McGass, all these doctors they put everything on the line, and they lost everything. They lost everything. We've all lost everything with standing up for our patients, standing up for people, and standing up and speaking out about what we know is wrong. We know it's wrong. We know that we've lost informed consent, we've lost bodily autonomy, we've lost medical privacy, the relationship has been completely destroyed. We have bureaucrats that were the colleges, the health authorities, getting in between the doctor and the patient and saying, no, you cannot treat this patient this way. You cannot treat with hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or anything else that you want to try. We just have the vaccines, and that's what you're going to take, right? And so it's been just an absolute disaster. And I've been speaking out about topics that a lot of the vast majority of healthcare professionals don't dare talk about. And really that is the vaccine injuries, the COVID vaccine deaths, And we've just been flooded with a tsunami of vaccine injuries and vaccine deaths, with excess mortality, with sudden deaths in younger and younger people. In Alberta, CBC came out and said 10,000 excess deaths in Alberta since the start of the pandemic. Most of those coming in 2021 and 2022. 2021, number one cause of death in Alberta, 3,400 Albertans died of cause unknown. And what's that? Yes, died of coincidence.
Climate change.
Climate change, yeah. And they're not looking, they don't want to go. They don't want to be going to the vaccines. The thing is, excess deaths are skyrocketing in every highly COVID-19 vaccinated country. United States, 300,000 excess deaths in 2022. Japan, 91,000. Germany, 102,000. UK, 54,000. Australia, 42,000. The numbers are rising.
Yeah, it's not leveling out.
It's not leveling out. And so I was thinking about, before I started my talk, I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll sort of break it down into good news and bad news. And there's very little good news when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines. And the only good news is that only 22% of all Canadians are up to date on their COVID-19 vaccines. 22%. That means that in the eyes of Health Canada, 78% of Canadians are considered either unvaccinated, or as they call it, not up to date. On their vaccine.
And they're throwing out a bunch of vaccines.
Exactly. So that is the good news. Unfortunately, that is the only good news. But it means that 78% of Canadians have had enough. They have not taken a booster shot in the past 6 months. And that number, 22%, it's not going up. It has leveled off. The bivalent booster rollout has been a complete disaster.
Perfect.
Yeah.
People have had enough.
Yeah. What about the kids?
Well, so I'm gonna get into that. Yeah. So excess deaths skyrocketing in all the highly COVID-19 vaccinated countries. Now, when you look at deaths in 2020, when you look at deaths in Canada in 2020, what most people don't realize is that 80% of COVID-19 deaths in 2020 were in long-term care home settings. 80% of COVID deaths. I can tell you, I've looked at data and information from the UK, and I'm convinced that most of those deaths were euthanization of the elderly by drugs, midazolam, morphine, other drugs, neglect. People were left to die, people were not given antibiotics, proper treatments. The vast majority of those deaths were deliberately inflicted, and they labeled them as COVID deaths so they could get their pandemic.
Money.
And that was how this pandemic started. It had come out of that. The UK government had ordered something like 2 years' supply of midazolam at euthanasia doses, not at lowering anxiety doses or euthanasia doses. 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. They ordered a 2-year supply from France, and they used it all up in the first few months of the pandemic. And that information is out there. That information is available. So it was murder. Yeah, exactly. And so that was 2020. And then of course you got 2021, and you got the rollout of the vaccines. And of course, anyone dying in the first 14 days of getting the vaccine is labeled unvaccinated and a COVID death, right? Because they'll give you a test and probably a false positive, and boom, you got your.
That's the year the
You
flu
got your. What's that?
That's the year the flu disappeared.
Oh, the flu disappeared as well. Yeah. So so in 2021, you have this fraud that all the public health authorities are pushing of the pandemic of the unvaccinated. The pandemic of the unvaccinated was a fraud. It never happened. It was never a pandemic of the unvaccinated. They were massaging the data from the very beginning, trying to make the vaccines look good, They were testing the unvaccinated very differently from the vaccinated. They were not writing vaccine status or positive COVID tests for those who were vaccinated. They were doing everything they could, again, to spike the numbers and give us fake data. But as 2021 rolled along, it was clear that the vaccinated were starting to get harmed. They were being harmed. They were starting to get sicker and sicker. They were filling the hospitals, and they started dying. And so they kept deleting the bad data. They kept fudging the numbers, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And then, of course, they rolled out the booster shots. And then the triple vaccinated started filling the hospitals. The triple vaccinated started dying. And it got to the point where, in the summer of 2022, something like over 80% of the hospitalizations for COVID-19 were in the vaccinated, and close to 90% of the deaths were in the vaccinated, the majority of them made up of the triple vaccinated.
Were they dying of COVID or were they dying of strokes and?
Well, that's the question, right? Because when you look, and this hasn't been done in Canada, but if you review, the dying with COVID versus from COVID, it was the vast majority of the deaths were with, not from, right? And so, we've been lied to. We've been lied to throughout the pandemic. And in the summer of 2022, when the numbers looked really bad, and these were the massaged numbers that they had fixed to make the vaccines look good, and even then, the vaccines looked horrible, that they were harming people. They deleted all the data, and they made sure that we didn't know who was in the hospitals, how many vaccines they had had, because the vaccines were damaging people's immune systems, they were damaging people's hearts, people were having blood clots, strokes, myocarditis, pericarditis, all kinds of neurological injuries. So, one thing I want to give you sort of is an idea of the carnage of the COVID-19 vaccines, sort of a quick shorthand that you can kind of take home and say, okay, this is how bad this is at this point, because it continues to get worse. So in the highly COVID vaccinated countries, jurisdictions, about 1 per 1,000 people died in 2022 as excess deaths. So in Alberta, we got a 4.6 million population. We've had about 4,000 to 5,000 excess deaths. Now they're being labeled as unknown cause. I'm saying they're due to the COVID-19 vaccines. Look at United States, again, about 300,000 excess deaths. Dr. Peter McCullough talks about this. Dr. Paul Alexander can talk about this. Again, 1 in 1,000 people dead as excess deaths. Now, Ed Dodd has been looking at insurance data in the United States, and he's been looking at not just the excess mortality, which he says has skyrocketed. He's basically come out recently and said that the working population of the United States has been poisoned. Has been poisoned by COVID, and he says the only explanation that exists is COVID-19 vaccines and COVID-19 vaccine mandates. He says, if anyone wants to come to him with evidence for a different explanation, he's more than happy to analyze the data. But he says that the working population has basically been poisoned by the vaccine mandates. The numbers that he's coming up with for people who've been permanently disabled by the COVID-19 vaccines to the point of having to apply for disability because they can't work is 1 in 100.
Wow.
1 in 100 working age population.
Yeah, disability insurance is expensive,
Yeah,
very expensive.
yeah. And so now that's disability. Now if you look at, well, who's having severe side effects, but maybe they can still keep working, still have their jobs. There was V-Safe data in the United States. I think this was released by the CDC. It was this app that they were giving to people, that people could enter any side effects that they had from the COVID-19 vaccines into this app. About 10 million people participated in it, and I found that close to 10% of people who were vaccinated with Pfizer or Moderna had symptoms severe enough to require hospitalization for medical attention in the past year. 10%, almost 10%. So that gives you a very kind of a quick idea of sort of the carnage of the COVID-19 vaccines up to this point. Now, it continues to get worse. I thought, people stopped taking the booster shots, it's gonna get better. And it's not. If you look at the obituaries, if you study who's dying suddenly, who's dying in their sleep, you're gonna see it's just people of all ages, but a lot of young people. And what I've noticed over the last few months is that the sudden deaths keep getting younger and younger and younger. And that's really frustrating because no one's talking about it, no one's allowed to talk about it.
I am.
So I've been tracking, the deaths of Canadian doctors, the sudden deaths. It sort of started in late 2021 when doctors started taking their booster shots. I was a 52-year-old cardiologist in New Brunswick, Dr. Surab Luchmedial, who took his booster shot, and he hated anti-vaxxers. Man, he was like, I want to punch them in the face. He's like, if those guys drop dead, I'm not going to cry at their funeral. He was posting this on Twitter and on Facebook.
Yikes.
He ran to get his booster shot. First one in line. He got the booster shot before it was even rolled out in healthcare workers. Because he posted it on Facebook. Got my third shot. Got a bit of flu symptoms. 2 thumbs up. He died in his sleep 2 weeks later. Died in his sleep. There was another doctor, Toronto doctor, 48 years old, and this was just a couple of weeks later. And again, he had taken his booster shot. Dr. Neil Singh Dalla, he ran a bunch of clinics in the Greater Toronto area, family medicine clinics. A very healthy young man, 48 years old, businessman, very business savvy, multiple clinics in Toronto. Took his booster shot. About 3-4 days later, he was at a Christmas party at his friend's house. Starts feeling unwell. It's like, I gotta lie down. Lies down on his friend's couch. He never wakes up. Dead at 48 years old. Right? And so, I started tracking this. I started looking at it, and I just saw more and more doctors dropping dead. I got to a point where I counted 132 doctors who died suddenly or unexpectedly since the rollout of the vaccines in the beginning of 2021. And so drummers ran that at one of their issues. I think when it was about 80 doctors, they put all the photographs on the front page of the newspaper. And of course, the media came out firing. They wanted to shut this down. They don't want anybody. They said this is disinformation. This is made up. Marcus is this crazy guy who's just making all this stuff up. Right? I'm not making it up. I had a team of people who had gone through all the obituaries for the past 4 years, all the info from all the medical associations. We tracked 2,200 doctor deaths over the past 4 years. And what comes out of that database is that 50% more doctors died in 2022 than in 2019. 50% more physician mortality. That's the excess physician mortality of working physicians, working age physicians, 50%. And the thing is, it's skewed to the young ones. And that's not what you'd expect, is that the younger you are, the higher the mortality. And doctors under 30 who are medical students, medical residents, they're dying at 900% higher rate compared to 2019. The young doctors are dropping dead. And they were all forced, they were all mandated to take the shot. They have to stay in medical school, otherwise they'd be kicked out of it. Right? So they had no say, they had no choice. I was in that position in 2009 in Quebec. I was just about to finish my residency at McGill, and we had the swine flu, H1N1. There was a whole panic about the swine flu. And I remember they just came out with the vaccine, and I'm like, I'm not taking that vaccine, fuck that. And then, unfortunately, one day they tell us, okay, that's where you're gonna go line up, all of you. We've got a vaccine clinic, and you're all getting a shot. I thought, oh man, here we go. And I went and I lined up and I got the shot with everyone else. Because I was like, if I lose my career that I'd spent, the last 15 years trying to get into medical school as an immigrant kid from a tiny village in Czechoslovakia, what am I going to do? I put my entire life into this. So I strongly sympathize with these young people who were forced to take the damn shots or else lose everything. And for some of them, it is everything. Because imagine, we're just about to finish med school, you're in debt, $100,000, $200,000. Your parents have put everything into this to get you in. What are you gonna do? You're gonna say, hey, well, I don't wanna take this vaccine, it might harm me. No, you're gonna take the shot. And so the doctors have been really getting hit hard, and they're in denial. They're in denial. I get so much hate. The most hate I get online is from other MPs.
Yeah, but are they not seeing the deaths?
I don't know.
Like, I don't get that.
I don't know.
They
They're
gotta see it.
blind. They're completely blind. They're not. Either they're not seeing it, or they've been paid so well to push the vaccines that. I just.
Is it true that they all got letters basically saying that you push the vaccine or you get the vaccine?
Well, let me put it this
Don't
way.
talk about it?
They all got memos from the colleges of physicians and surgeons, saying that they're not allowed to, basically they're not allowed to stray from the government narrative. They're not allowed to write mask exemption letters, vaccine exemption letters. They're not allowed to dissuade their patients from getting the vaccine. They're not allowed to create vaccine hesitancy.
Isn't that when you say I'm taking a sabbatical?
What's that?
Isn't that when you say I'm taking a sabbatical?
Well, you should. If you care about your Hippocratic oath, you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the vast majority of doctors just rolled over. They just rolled over, they took it. And I always say, whenever I'm doing a speech, I always want to acknowledge the nurses who, a lot of them stood up and they said, no way am I doing this. Some of them said, okay, I'm going into early retirement, I'm quitting medicine, I'm leaving the province. So many nurses stood up and said no, and pushed back. The doctors, virtually none. Other than the handful of doctors that you all know, because there's so few of us, right? There's like 10 of them in the entire country, and there's 100,000 doctors in Canada. And literally, you can count on two hands the doctors who have stood up and risked everything to protect their patients out of 100,000 doctors.
I have a question. This has come to my mind a lot of times. How stupid are the elites? If they really wanted us to all comply, why the frick wouldn't they have let the doctors all take placebos so that everybody would see that, like there wouldn't be any, huh?
A lot of them did. There's a lot of saline being used, let's just say.
I know, but there's so many doctors that, they've
Only
had
the ones connected.
adverse reactions or.
I'll tell you this, I'll tell you my theory on this. My theory is that they want to collapse the healthcare system.
Yep.
Because they want to transform it, and I'll tell you where I get that from. Okay. So in 2020, in July 2020, Alberta Health Services put out a news release that very few people noticed. And they said, we signed a cooperation agreement with the World Economic Forum.
Oh, wow.
Alberta Health Services has been selected in the company of, Mayo Clinic and Harvard and what have you. They listed some of the big names in the United States. And they said, we have now a partnership with the WEF. We're going to be one of the locations where the WEF is going to look at optimizing healthcare, transforming healthcare. We're going to have access to cutting-edge technologies, hint AI. Hint. We're going to have access to industries. We're going to have access to money. We're part of this new club now. And no one picked it up. very few people know that Alberta Health Services, which is the largest health authority in Canada by far, 105,000 healthcare workers, has a partnership with the WEF.
When
Announced,
was that signed?
this was announced on July 2020. I think it's still up.
Oh, so just like right at the start of the.
Right at the start. Yeah. So, and imagine now AHS becomes part of this international club. And they say, now we get special access
Oh, that's why they were
to all
so
kinds of
stupid.
things. Yeah, exactly. So I think, this sort of turmoil that we're seeing in healthcare, the doctors getting sick, collapsing, dying suddenly, nurses getting sick, other healthcare workers getting sick, I think it's deliberate. I think they want to crash the healthcare systems so that they can do their transition. Right? You can't do a transition unless you collapse the system first.
Order through chaos.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So thank you to the nurses who stood up, pushed back, fought back. I've gotten so many emails and letters and messages of support from nurses. It was incredible. And I didn't expect it in a way because, in Alberta, NDP thinks that they have a monopoly on the nurses, that they have a lock on the support of the nurses. And yet, when AHS rolled out the vaccine mandates, who was cheering on unvaccinated nurses being fired, kicked out? It was NDP, Rachel Notley. They were cheering. They're like, unvaccinated healthcare workers shouldn't step foot in a hospital. Those posts are still up on Twitter. She's not ashamed of it. She's proud of it. In fact, not that long ago, she held a press conference saying that if we get elected, or NDP, we're going to invest in teams that are going to go door to door, finding out who is unvaccinated and vaccinating them.
Gee, I hope she's
Now imagine, I'm coming up from a communist country, and I never heard this in communism. Communists were horrible. They committed horrific crimes. They killed a ton of people. And I'll tell you one thing they didn't do. They didn't force vaccinate people. And that's what the NDP wants to do. Right? And the media they're not calling her out on it. They're like, oh look. Nothing wants to go door to door vaccinating, finding out who's unvaccinated, vaccinating, right? So that's the insanity of NDP.
But they can knock on my door, I'll take one for the team, that bitch won't leave my front steps.
Give me a call, Donna. I said they give me a call.
One thing I want to tell you, it's not just the doctors. Nurses are collapsing, dentists. I get emails from everybody. People are sending me obituaries. Look, chiropractors, nurses, osteopaths, all kinds of healthcare workers are dropping dead, dying suddenly. Now it's the pilots. And I don't know if you've heard about it. This morning, Southwest Air pilot collapsed. The plane diverted. This is from Las Vegas. Pilot collapsed. Co-pilot. Plane diverted. I think they landed the plane a couple of days ago. It was Emirates Air pilot collapsed. They landed the plane safely. British Airways, a few days before that, British Airways Airbus 320 from Cairo to London. Pilot collapsed in the crew hotel in Cairo. In the hallway, they did CPR, he died.
Wow.
He was literally about to fly an Airbus 320, but he just collapsed and died just a few hours before that. United Airlines, pilot collapsed, then they had the ambulance waiting on the runway once the co-pilot landed the plane, and what was the last one? There was another one. Virgin, WestJet. Yes. I posted that, yeah. That he was a pilot in training. Died suddenly, 39 years old. Calgary. There's also Virgin Australia Again, the pilot collapsed, and they managed to land the plane safely. This is in the last 3 weeks.
And how have they lifted the prerequisites?
Well, so they're tinkering with the prerequisites. You know, some of the airlines are doing physicals virtually, right? They're changing the EKG parameters for the pilots. A couple of months ago, they were saying, well, you know what, we should actually just have one pilot in the cockpit to save money, or because we have shortages of pilots. This is insanity, right? I mean, we are this close to having a major airline disaster happening, and pilots are furious. They're furious, they're angry, they're posting online. I mean, I get messages from pilots, and they're just absolutely livid. And they know that these cardiac issues from the vaccine, they're happening, and they know that it's just a matter of time before something really bad is gonna happen. And if the plane goes down, you know,
Why don't they
what's
walk
that?
out?
I think they want it to happen.
Well, that's another,
Yeah,
so,
that too.
People afraid to fly?
yeah, and if it happens, that may be the end of our flying days, right? I know.
Well, it's all part of the plan, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So, again, that's another big issue, and it's just happening very recently. This is all very recent, right? So, I mean, God help us if, like I said, if a big airliner actually goes down because one pilot had an incident, and then imagine the other pilot has an incident.
They
Right.
can't even eat the same meal, for Pete's sake, in case of.
This morning, the Southwest Air's pilot that collapsed, I think there was a pilot that was a non-Southwest pilot that was just in the back, hitching a ride, who went in, took over in the wrong cockpit, and landed the plane. This is insanity, right? This is completely insane.
Well, may
and
the
it's
plane
happening
holding
right now.
all of these corrupt people be the one that goes down.
Yeah.
We had a chance to take them out when they were all in Davos,
Yeah.
and nobody manned up.
That's right.
What can we talk you know?
So that's another. So we've got doctors dropping dead. We've got pilots collapsing in flight, right? The thing that really frustrates me, and that I want to sort of stress to you, is that it's happening in younger and younger people. It's happening in college age students. It's happening in high school students. And I've been reporting on this, and I'm getting a lot of hate and a lot of heat on this. And I bet you there's a Global News reporter right now that's doing a hit piece. Because they did a couple of hit pieces on me on the doctors back in January, when they completely smeared me and said this is all made up bullshit and this is not happening. And Global News investigated the deaths of 80 doctors. She didn't know at the time that it was 132 because I hadn't released the update yet. And so it's this 20-something-year-old reporter that had basically lived in New Zealand and Dubai and what have you. Now she's writing hit pieces against Canadian doctors. This is not the first hit piece she's done. She's done hit pieces against Dr. Charles Hoff, against Patrick Phillips, these dangerous doctors that are spreading disinformation. So she goes and says, I investigated for months these Canadian doctor deaths. I investigated them, I called the families, I reread the obituaries, and she goes, I determined the cause of death in 40-something of these doctors. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. We don't need pathologists anymore. We have Global News reporters that can determine the cause of death. Imagine the money that will save, right? It's like that article that the Canadian Medical Association put out, that if we just do euthanasia, how much money we're going to save in our healthcare system, right? You know, I mean, the audacity of these people, like the arrogance, the narcissism, right? But she comes out with this, she's like, I determined the cause of death in 50 doctors, and it was heart attacks and cancers and this and that, strokes. And people are like, yeah, that's what the vaccine causes. Heart attacks, strokes, cancers. She just literally listed all the side effects of the vaccine, right? So this is what we're dealing with the mainstream media. With the young people and the kids, I tracked it for a while, and it's gotten to a point where I can't really do it anymore because there's too many. There's too many deaths of young people. I put out in January alone, 10 kids ages 20 or 21 had died suddenly unexpectedly in Canada. 10 in the month of January, all previously healthy. Right? There was a group of 5 kids in January, ages 17 to 19, that had died in their sleep. 3 of them athletes, previously healthy. Right? There are hockey players dying. There was a 13-year-old hockey player in grade 8, Eric Coppersham in Calgary, who had actually gone to a basketball tryout and had collapsed during the basketball tryout and died. Right? And we know that kids 12 and up had to be vaccinated. Right? These were the rules from whatever the hockey leagues, from the city facilities. I mean, I couldn't take my kids to swimming lessons. My kids were 9 and 11 years old. I couldn't step foot into the recreation center to take my kids to their swimming lessons.
Full of trannies in there if you want to go there.
So, and they have people standing, with their desks checking vaccination records, right? So, these kids, they're younger and younger and they're dropping dead, right?
What can we do? What can we do?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll get to that. And so, I've learned recently, there was a 7-year-old boy in Calgary, hockey player, Slade Smith, and he had, now they said, well, he had the flu, and then he died. Okay. And that's why I was really tracking the kids during this big respiratory viral outbreak. I'm like, okay, healthy kids don't die from the flu. They just don't, right? So you've got all these healthy kids and they just happen to be playing hockey and they're all dropping dead, right? And I found out recently that yes, he had gotten 2 COVID-19 vaccines. But one day he comes to his dad and says, "Daddy, my heart hurts." And so they call the hotline and they tell the nurse the symptoms or whatever. They're like, he's probably got the flu, right? And then a day or 2 later, he dropped. He was dead. Right? When I had tracked the actual numbers, I found 96 kids in Canada that had died suddenly or unexpectedly, age 2 to 19. 96 kids had died in the span of 3 months. Previously healthy kids. I put that out, and man, did they come after me. I was just swarmed with hate and just people trying to silence me. No one wants to hear this. No one wants to hear that kids are dropping dead from the vaccines. They're dying in their sleep. They're dying when they're playing hockey, when they're playing, football. There was a gymnastics, prodigy, 15 years old, who had dropped dead. This is happening, and it's happening with an increasing frequency. And so what I've been telling anyone who would listen is, the number one is stop taking the damn shots. Stop taking the shots. Stop giving it to the kids. And of course, in some cases, that's not possible. I've had a lot of families come to me where one party doesn't want to vaccinate the kids, and now the other parent is taking them to court. And
It's
they're like,
experimental. Like, what are these parents
I
thinking?
don't know.
I don't understand.
I don't know, but I can tell you, I can give you numbers. So, kids ages 12 to 19, 80% of kids in Canada ages 12 to 19 have had at least 2 doses
That's
of
Wow.
COVID-19 vaccine. 80%, can you imagine? 80%. Kids 5 to 11 years old, 51% of all kids in Canada 5 to 11 have had at least 2 doses.
That's because they couldn't do anything.
And I'm not even talking about the booster shots.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously it dropped off, right? It dropped off the cliff, the booster shot numbers.
Well, Elmo said how good it was.
Yeah.
But again, it's one shot is enough to do permanent damage or kill you. Right?
Infertility.
And so, there's that whole issue of stillbirths and infertility and all that, and menstrual issues, irregularities, which are extremely common, right, with the vaccinations. So it's happening in younger and younger kids, and I tell parents, I tell grandparents, I say, listen, you have to keep a close eye on these vaccinated kids. The kids have been vaccinated. You gotta keep a really close eye on them because they've had their immune systems damaged. And the immune system damage takes months to show up. It takes about 6 to 8 months for the immune system to really bottom out. And that's when they're the most vulnerable. And I believe that's why we've had the biggest respiratory outbreak in the last few months ever.
I run a childcare,
Yeah.
and I can tell you, I'm gonna get emotional. Since these kids, they're probably 90% are vaccinated. Mine are not.
What are the ages?
From a year to school age, because they have after school. They're all vaccinated, and
Yeah.
they have been nothing but sick.
Sick.
Yeah.
And ear infection
Yeah.
after ear infection after ear infection.
It damages their immune system.
Oh,
It damages their immune system, and like I said, the maximal damage seems to show up around 6 to 8 months after their last shot. That's when they're the most vulnerable. And we had this huge flu outbreak, this respiratory outbreak, RSV flu, and all of that stuff. Tens of thousands of kids home from school. I remember in Alberta, in Edmonton, they were telling us 20,000 kids are sick. 20,000 kids are sick. Schools are 20-30% empty.
Yeah, they-
Right? And if you go back and you look back, okay, when did they roll out the vaccines in these kids? It was about 9 months before that. And they did their big push to get all those
They
kids
were sick right from the get-go.
vaccinated. Well, you can be sick from the very beginning,
Yeah.
but it does damage your immune system, and that's why, people are sort of not realizing the risks. Because they don't know that these kids are going to be immunosuppressed months later, and for many, many months later, right? And so these kids, they can come down with the flu. And my kids, man, when my kids get sick, I give them elderberry syrup, I slip them some quercetin or lysine into their applesauce, and boom, 2-3 days later, they're back in school.
Yeah.
Like nothing, right? They bounce back very quickly.
Yeah, but the other ones that are.
And now I live in a big NDP. I live in Edmonton, okay. but I live in a very hardcore NDP riding. When we had the mayoral elections, Amarjit Sohi, who was the Liberal Minister of Energy under Trudeau, all the lawn signs in my neighborhood went up for Sohi, Liberal lawn signs, right? So hardcore NDP, and I'm telling you, my kids, all of their classmates are vaccinated. And their moms were taking them, they were the first ones in line to get vaccinated.
Do you think your
And
kids
they,
are in danger of being around them? Because my grandkids aren't vaxxed either, and they went back to school after the mask shit came off, but now they're one of few that aren't. Do you think our kids are in danger with those?
it's hard to tell. It's hard to say. Basically, it's an issue of shedding.
Yeah,
Right.
I believe it.
I believe
It's,
it.
I believe shedding happens. I believe it's real.
Yep.
Most people don't react to shedding, so that's a good thing. Most people just don't have any kind of reaction. Some people do. My kids don't seem to have any kind, and they play with their friends,
I
all
think
the
it
time.
comes out in rashes, because I
It
have
can.
seen nothing
It
but
can.
rash after rash
Yeah.
after rash.
So it can happen. Like I said, fortunately, most people don't react to it. The ones who do should be taking some spike protein blocking supplements.
Okay,
Right.
what are those?
You guys are skipping away.
Let's get to the good stuff.
Okay, let's get to the good stuff. I'll get back to it.
Yeah.
So anyways, you gotta keep a close eye on those kids, right? Stop the damn shots. No more shots for the kids. And let their bodies, let their immune systems recover, right? Because they do start to recover after about a year, right? In fact, everyone starts to recover now. The recovery is not full, at least from what I've seen. It's not a full recovery, but whenever you look at the data, you've got double, triple, quadruple vaccinated, right? And you can see it in Australia. Look at the Australian data before they shut that whole thing down too, right? Is when you look at the double, triple, quadruple vaccinated, it's the quadruple vaccinated that are the sickest, man. They're filling the hospitals. And then, because they do the actual rates of infection per 100,000 or whatever. So you can actually compare the rates directly, and you see that the double vaccinated do way better than the triple or quadruple vaccinated, which means that the immune system does recover, but you need time. And it looks like it takes at least 12 to 18 months for the immune system to really start to recover. It doesn't recover fully. Well, we don't know. We haven't had enough time,
Right.
right? There hasn't been enough long enough time for us to see, and of course, all the governments have pulled all the data, so we may never find out. But you need to give your body time to start to recover, and the problem is that the reason why they wanted the booster shots every 6 months is they don't want your body to recover. They want you to be dependent on the shots, to keep taking the shots, to remain immunosuppressed. Because they don't want your body to recover. They know that they have the data. They always had the data from the beginning. They know what the vaccines do. They know the damage that it causes. And they know that people will start to recover after a year or more. That's why they wanted to keep the booster shots going every 6 months.
Customer for
And
life.
to this day, exactly, customers for life. And to this day, they're still, even in the States, they're still pushing the idea of, well, let's keep, let's do annual. Now they're backed off to annual, right? Because no one's taking the shots anymore. So like, well, we'll do annual COVID shots and we'll combine it with flu shots. And now you're gonna have flu mRNA shots. You're gonna have RSV mRNA shots, right? Because they want to roll that out next. That's in the pipeline. That's in phase 3. That's gonna be out in a couple of months. They'll be pushing that, right? So you have to keep a close eye on the kids. They struggle. The vaccinated kids struggle with influenza, RSV, sort of all kinds of other infections. They'll end up being sick for weeks, right? I mean, their friends are off school 2-3 weeks at a time, right?
Are
They really,
those childhood vaccines, are they making them mRNA too?
eventually, they're gonna. They've said that they'll eventually want to make all vaccines
Because
mRNA.
I'll tell you,
There are so many mRNA vaccines in the pipeline. I think Moderna has at least 30
I've got
mRNA
three,
vaccines in the pipeline.
I have 3 boys right now that have either autism or ADHD, and they're all born 5-year-olds. It's gone, it's skyrocketed.
Yeah. So it's going to become a big issue because then, I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't trust, at the bare minimum, I wouldn't trust the flu vaccine because you wouldn't believe how many times, this has happened in the States, it's happened in Canada, how many times parents brought their child to get a flu shot and they got the adult dose COVID-19 vaccine instead.
Wow.
It's happened hundreds. Like you may have heard about 1 or 2 cases in the news. I went digging. It's happened hundreds of times to hundreds of kids. There's kids that have gotten myocarditis, and now there's lawsuits. In the States, you can sue.
Dr. Backus, I'd just
Yeah.
like to, they're building Moderna plants everywhere.
Yeah.
They're running commercials in Boston, Massachusetts about a new Moderna facility coming and people who apply to get jobs there.
Yeah.
They're talking about it's going to be new mRNA vaccines focused on cancer.
It's cancer, but it's going to be in everything. Heart damage, mRNA vaccine, right? You got shingles
Yeah.
from a COVID shot, mRNA vaccine will fix that, right? No, like I said, if you haven't seen what's in the pipeline for Pfizer and Moderna, have a quick look. Just put Pfizer pipeline, research pipeline, whatever, and you'll see it's just an endless list of mRNA they want to pump out. And you're right, they're building mRNA factories all over the place. I think it was the Moderna CEO was boasting that he wants to have at least 1 mRNA factory in every continent. Canada, UK, Australia, they're building a huge mRNA factory in a smart city in South Korea. They're pumping out, and they're literally investing billions of dollars into this, and they know that people don't want the shots, that people are being, injured and killed by the millions, and they don't care. They're doubling down. They keep pouring the money. They're not backing off.
That doesn't even make sense.
And at one point, they're going to try to rehabilitate the COVID-19 vaccines. They're going to say, well, that it was the spike protein, or it was the first one, or whatever, because they're already using that language. When they were talking about the influenza or the RSV, they're like, oh, that's a stable protein. It's based on a stable protein. It doesn't mutate. Don't worry, it's super safe. Not like the COVID-19 vaccines, right? So.
How much does it affect us if they put mRNA in animals, like in monkeys?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I keep a close eye on that because, there's stories coming out. They want to start vaccinating. I don't know if it's cows in Australia or whatever it was. It's starting. I'll keep a very close eye
I
on
know a lot
where
of cows that died.
What's that?
I know a lot of pets that died in the last year and a half.
The zoo animals are dying.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of home pets that have died, and I
Who
think
vaccinated their pets?
Yeah.
I think it's the spike protein. I think it's.
Oh, you mean from the shedding?
I think it is.
Oh, okay.
I do think so because
That's
I know
possible.
a lot of people.
There's a lot of them they die of cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
like
like-
aggressive cancers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was after.
So, I mean, they vaccinated zoo animals, and those zoo animals are coming down with kidney disease, they're coming down with cancer, they're dropping dead, I mean, right? So, one other thing I want to sort of tell you about, and just give you a quick rundown, and it's the causes of the sudden deaths. What is causing the sudden deaths from the vaccine? And it's something that vaccinated people will have to be careful about and really sort of understand the risks of what can kill you. What is it that kills people suddenly? And it's basically four main things. It's myocarditis is the biggest one. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart. The vaccine gets into the bloodstream from the arm. It's not supposed to, but it ends up in the bloodstream. The lipid nanoparticles carried it all over the place. It gets into the heart. There's been a spike protein found in the heart, causes a massive inflammation, and it's usually silent. People don't know that they have it. They call it subclinical myocarditis. So people will be walking around with inflamed hearts. They won't have chest pain. They won't have shortness of breath. They simply won't know that they have it.
For years or for.
Indefinitely. Yeah. And the problem is that anyone who has, now I'll tell you how frequent it is, and Dr. Peter McCullough agrees with me on this. I mean, he's the expert. He's the cardiologist. Dr. Paul Alexander as well. It's 1 in 30. 1 in 30 vaccinated people will develop myocarditis per shot.
Wow.
And those people are at risk. Now, not every case of myocarditis will lead to sudden death, of course. It's very random which one does. But any case of vaccine-induced myocarditis can result in a sudden death. And it's 1 in 30. They've told us 1 in 5,000, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 20,000. They've lied. It's 1 in 30. And there's 2 studies that have proven that. They did a prospective study in Thailand with 200 boys, and they tested them before the Pfizer shot, tested them after, and they found myocarditis in 1 in 30. They repeated it they did it with 800 hospital workers in Switzerland, same thing. 1 in 35 had evidence of heart damage, myocarditis, after their booster shot. So that's the number. 1 in 30 is the risk of myocarditis. That's why we're seeing so many sudden deaths, and everyone's like, why is there so many sudden deaths?
Why the males though? Like,
It's women too.
It is more.
It's women
because
too.
I find I hear more about the males than the females.
Yes, but now it's showing that women are almost as at risk as men. And if you ever look at the sudden deaths, you're gonna see young women. Now, it's usually women in athletics,
Yes.
right? So we had the 27-year-old Dr. Candice Naiman in Ontario, triathlete. Imagine what it takes to be in medical school and be a triathlete, right? And she collapses. This was in McMaster. They actually lost 3 of their medical students and residents this past summer.
Same
Died
week.
suddenly or unexpectedly. Imagine 3 in one medical school in Canada. That's never happened. That's never happened. And she was one of them. And she was doing a triathlon, or she was doing a practice triathlon. She collapses in the swimming portion. They get her to the hospital. She's in the ICU 4 days. They can't save her. She dies. 27 years old. You're going to see it's happening to women as well. And women are not being told about this risk. Because most women who've heard about myocarditis, they're like, oh, that's an issue with boys and young boys, and that's it. No, it's affecting women as well. So myocarditis is a huge one. 1 in 30 men and women are affected. The only thing that I have found that can treat heart inflammation potentially save someone from a sudden death is taurine. Taurine is an amino acid. You can get it as a supplement. It's found in energy drinks. Taurine is what they put in. It's that stuff that's kind of bitter. And they put it in to keep mental alertness up, but it actually has anti-inflammatory effects on the heart. They use it in Japan to treat heart failure. The Japanese have massive amounts of taurine in their diet. They eat it in fish, it's in octopus, it's in squid. They've tested the Japanese, they found in their urine massive levels of taurine, and they think that that's why the Japanese have such a low incidence of ischemic heart disease. And they all live to 80, 90, and none of them have heart disease.
Is that a supplement?
You can get it as a supplement on Amazon for $10. Taurine. It's the only thing I have found, and this was in a collaboration with Mexican doctors who studied it. They contacted me, they're like, listen, I think this could save some lives, protect some people. Taurine. Okay, so myocarditis is a big one. It's responsible for the vast majority of sudden deaths. Blood clots is another big one. The blood clots are not normal. If you've seen the movie Died Suddenly, I don't know how many of you seen the movie Died Suddenly.
Yeah, my father,
It's
5 weeks ago.
oh he actually had blood clots.
Well, they
Total blood clots.
So the issue with the blood clots is these are not normal blood clots. These are not normal blood clots. They're sort of white, rubbery, and they show you plenty of them in that movie Died Suddenly. They're pulling, sometimes they're really, really long. It's amyloid protein that is actually in the sequence of the mRNA. If the mRNA breaks down in your system and the body's translating these fragments of the spike protein mRNA, it actually produces amyloid proteins, which then get incorporated into blood clots. And many of these proteins, the scientists found they can actually form these long fibrils, and they can actually just keep extending. And that's how you end up with these long, like multi-foot long clots. And there was a 21-year-old athlete in the States that they pulled out a 6-foot long clot out of his legs.
And they don't dissolve with blood
And they
thinners.
don't dissolve with blood thinners.
What happens when you fly? Like, what is happening? Because, like, he had a stroke on the plane.
What's that?
He had a stroke on the plane.
Yeah.
So what is happening when these pilots are having incidents? It's like, what's going
Are those
on?
blood clots?
Are they blood clots or strokes?
I don't know because they, the pilots who have died, I have not seen any autopsies.
Right.
There's some people that say it's because you're higher playing your blood.
Well, it's
thinners.
altitude and
Thinner. Is that it?
pressure in
I
the
don't know.
brain.
I don't know enough about it, to be honest.
Well, I
don't.
thought it was cabin pressure, right?
It's hard to hear, there's conversations that are going on here.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just keep going and then I'll do questions at the end. And I'm almost finished. So the blood clots, they don't resolve. The body has no way of breaking them down. And so in some people, the blood clots just keep building and building until they either get long enough or until they break off. They go in the heart, they cause a heart attack, go in the brain, they cause a stroke, they go in the lungs, cause a pulmonary embolus. All of those can be fatal. Okay? Nattokinase is an enzyme that was developed, was found in Japan. It's made from fermentation of soybeans. They extract it, it breaks down spike protein, it breaks down regular blood clots, and it breaks down amyloid blood clots. And Dr. Peter McCullough is very big on nattokinase right now because they found this is the one thing that can completely break down the spike protein. It helps a lot of people with long COVID, and it helps a lot of people with vaccine injuries. What's that? 20, 25, 30 bucks on Amazon. It depends. If you're taking it prophylactically, one pill is enough. If you actually have symptoms or you suspect you may have blood clots, 2 or 3 a day. Taurine is usually 500. I think it comes in 500s. And again, prophylactically, 1 pill. See, that's the thing. Is if you're going to take the supplements, think of it like this. If you just want to sort of prophylactically protect yourself from shedding or whatever, you take 1. If you want to actually, if you're really worried about symptoms and you want to treat something, take 2 or 3, depending on, so that's the one. Nattokinase, Nattokinase. The next category of sudden deaths is neurological injuries. The spike protein does get into the brain and it causes problems. We know that it can cause inflammation. You can get vasculitis, inflammation of the vessels in the brain. You can get neuritis, inflammation of the neurons. And so this is not that widely known, But this is where you get the neurological injuries when people start having eye problems, people start having vision problems. Some people lose their vision when they've had their shot. Some people lose their hearing, or they start having hearing problems. They get tinnitus, they get vertigo, right? Then you get the facial paralysis. You got the movement disorders when people have those uncontrollable movements of the arms and legs, and they're essentially paralyzed, or they're bedridden. This is all neurological injury, neurological inflammation, because the spike protein gets into the brain. Seizure disorders. Some people take the vaccine, they start having seizures. Their doctor tells them, now you have a seizure disorder. You've never had seizures in your life. You took the vaccine or you took 2 doses, and now you have a seizure disorder. It's neurological injury. And again, now nanokinase for that, but also NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which is it's an amino acid. It's a powerful antioxidant that acts on the brain, and it acts to calm down the inflammation in the brain. The last category, and so the neurological, the things that can be fatal, seizures, unfortunately, can be fatal. And of course, they're extremely dangerous if you're driving, for example. And sometimes, I don't know if you've seen these videos where people just kind of start looking up.
Yeah.
And they see something and they start turning, and then they kind of do like a 1 or 2 turns and they collapse on the floor, they're writhing, and their arms are kind of like this. And that's one of these seizures. Again, it's a neurological injury. Seizures can be fatal. One thing that is probably the most controversial thing that I get the most hate and pushback on is increased risk of mental health disorders and increased anxiety, depression, psychosis, personality changes, and increased risk of suicide. I believe that the COVID vaccinated have a significantly increased risk of not just mental health disorders, but suicide as well. And this is one I get huge pushback on, because people don't want to believe it. And I put out an article on my Substack on psychotic episodes after COVID-19 vaccination in young people and also in kids. And you would not believe the kind of psychosis that people are having. Kids, they get visual hallucinations, they see demons, they see everything on fire, they start hearing things. They get auditory hallucinations. And I've had cases where someone just had one of these hallucinations, just jumped off the 3rd floor, or a kid that jumped off the 2nd floor, and dad grabs him at the last second before he's able to jump out. This is serious, and it happens. No one talks about it. No one wants to talk about it. The doctors won't tell you this. The last one I'm going to leave you with is what they call the turbo cancers. And these are cancers that, again, doctors are saying it doesn't exist. Turbo cancers, bullshit, it doesn't exist, right? It's happening. People are coming down with cancers that are extremely aggressive, extremely rapidly growing. I just got a week ago a message from a father who said, my daughter, 38 years old, had 2 or 3 shots, develops a small lump in her breast. The doctors are doing, their staging, their imaging, they're getting ready to do a little lumpectomy. And while they're waiting, and all this is happening, it grows to a softball size. And the doctors are, well, breast cancer doesn't behave this way. It shouldn't, right? And so they have to change the treatment plan. They don't know, first of all, they've never seen anything like this. Then now they have to do a radical mastectomy, they have to prepare her for chemo, radiation, completely changes the treatment, and it's just happening more and more and more. It's happening, we're seeing leukemias. There are young people that are being diagnosed with leukemia and dying 3-4 days later. It's that rapid. The leukemias, the lymphomas, people suddenly get these lumps, and it's aggressive, it spreads rapidly. People are coming down with kidney cancers, with pancreas cancers, breast cancers, and these cancers are not behaving like normal cancers that grow slowly. And it's my assessment as an oncologist is, and I've seen enough, the damage to the immune system caused by the vaccines is so significant, so severe, and so complicated that some people lose any protection that they had against cancerous cells, tumor cells, So that when they get a cancer cell, there's literally nothing to stop that cancer cell from growing rapidly, spreading, metastasizing. These things metastasize in a matter of months, 2, 3, 4.
Why is this not waking up all the freaking doctors in this country?
I don't know.
What's it saying to me? They can't be that brainwashed, they're pretty smart.
They don't want, I don't know if they don't want to know, or they're too afraid to say anything because they think they're going to lose their jobs.
It's a giant build-down spirit.
But it's happening, and the thing is, you may have heard a story of someone who developed a rapid cancer and was dead in a matter of months.
No.
It's just happening. It's happening more and more and more, and I don't know what to do with this. First thing, they'll have to acknowledge that this is happening, and then figure out how to protect these people. And again, if it's, maybe if you take a whole bunch of spike protein blockers and try, push your immune system with vitamin D and melatonin and take quercetin to block the spike protein, or bromelain, or olive leaf extract, or dandelion leaf, or white pine needle tea, or NAC, or
You could be
I don't know.
taking
Honestly, I don't know
all day long.
what you can do to protect someone. Ivermectin has anti-cancer properties, right? Fenbendazole is another one that has significant anti-cancer properties. So I don't know what you can do to protect yourself from that, because these cancers don't respond to normal treatment.
No.
They're that aggressive. And I don't know how long they can keep denying it, because there's so many of these cases. So I'm going to open it up to, I know it's been sort of back and forth questions, but I'll open it up to more questions at this point.
I would like to know what you think of the nicotine protocol that Dr. Artis is talking about, as well as his theory that there's snake venom in the
Yeah, so that's a very interesting theory. Okay. So this is Dr. Brian Artis has a theory that the COVID-19 vaccines are basically snake venom, toxic snake venom that effectively poisons you, like a snake venom would. Now, it's interesting, when I dug into this, I realized that he's not only talking about snake venom, like there's actual snake venom in the vaccines. What he's saying is that there are sequences in the mRNA of the spike protein that are very either similar or identical to proteins you find in the venom of certain venomous snakes. And that seems to be the case, that there are these sequences. Now, what do these sequences do in the body? That is the question. Now, the nicotine protocol is interesting because, again, smokers were at much lower risk of getting sick from COVID-19, so there seems to be some protective effect. So I would say if you're suffering from some side effects and you think it's a vaccine injury, I would give it a shot. I would give the nicotine protocol a shot. It's actually a very simple one. It's either you chew a nicotine gum or half a nicotine gum, or you take a patch, nicotine patch, you cut it up into 4 pieces, let's say, or 1 or 2 pieces.
There's lozenges too.
Or lozenges, and then he says, what the nicotine does, or supposed to do, it's supposed to dislodge these proteins from receptors, because when they're blocking certain receptors, they cause all kinds of toxic symptoms. Now, of course, you could start feeling sick if you do this. So he actually says, expect to feel sick. Let's say when you take the nicotine, then you can take vitamin C or NAC as antioxidants to kind of neutralize them, and something like bentonite clay or licorice root, ashwagandha, I think was another one to like flush this stuff out. So I would give it a shot. I absolutely would say if you're suffering from, maybe you're suffering from some neurological effects, give it a shot. It's simple. It doesn't seem like it can harm you. I would say give it a shot.
Don't chew that gum like regular gum. It's a few bites and then you rest, because you ask Laura Lynn what that does.
Okay, there you go. But I think he's onto something. I don't agree like 100%. Again, that it's all venomous, right? Because his theory is that it's basically all the vaccines have venoms in them and they make us sick and so on. I don't know, right? But I think he's at least onto something, and then I think it'd be worth for someone to try that if they're suffering and see if they get better. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, in our province, there is supplying this, I forget what it's called, starts with an E, and it's for macular degeneration disease where the patients are getting the injections into their eyes.
Okay.
Once every couple months. Here in Saskatchewan, a lot of people are being covered for like $25 and get reimbursed. And I said, why only Saskatchewan? Oh, we don't know. But Bear is behind that, and I'm just wondering if I should be concerned, because my dad's getting these shots.
I haven't heard anything.
I would suspect anything there is not good.
Yeah, I'd say.
I would suspect that anything there is not good.
Yeah.
They're in cahoots with Monsanto.
What about people that have lost their sense of smell without getting vaxxed, but because they've had COVID? Any thoughts on that?
Nanokinase seems to help some of those people. Nanokinase. Again, you can try. It's got to be trial and error because everyone reacts differently. The nanokinase and NAC seem to be the most powerful ones. NAC. Start with those, and then see if you get any improvement or not. Some people get it back with ivermectin, right?
BDSM.
You could try other sort of spike protein blocking supplements. Some kind of go through them and see if any of them help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Ryan Cole?
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else is, but with your background being a cancer expert, I think his stuff is very revealing as to what's going on.
Yeah. Well, he was showing on Dr. Drew's show slides, pathology slides of lymphoma tumors that were full of spike protein. And he said, look, the spike protein is found in these cancerous tumors. Now, of course, no one's testing for it here in Canada. No one is testing for that. But he's finding it, and again, it's like, what is the spike protein doing in this tumor? Is it stimulating the tumor growth? Is it a local effect where you kind of disable the immune system locally and then, the cancer just explodes? No one knows for sure, but I mean, he's been doing the work. The thing is, they've come after him. I heard that they've just shut down his lab. Yeah. Yeah.
I think most of these people in this room would agree that our belief system of our healthcare system is it didn't break when COVID came around.
Yeah.
Right? The Rockefeller family invented it with the American Medical Association. And so I guess my question is, how do we fix it with you in the medical community, and specifically with alternative healing methods like plant medicines in Gabor Mate's work, saving addictions and suicide and depression, things that are the real pandemic in this country that won't
You
be
have to
acknowledged.
dissolve the colleges.
Yeah.
You have to dissolve the colleges of physicians and surgeons, and you have to replace them with something completely different. Because the colleges are completely corrupt, they're completely rotten, they're run by lawyers. They're private corporations run by lawyers. Most people don't know this. But each college of physicians and surgeons across Canada is a private corporation. You cannot file freedom of information requests. I've tried. That's what I found out.
I don't even
They
think
are
they're
private
doctors.
corporations.
Or
What's
any
that?
of them even medical professionals? that are-
There's doctors on paper. So you'll have a registrar who's a doctor, you'll have a complaints director who's a doctor, you'll have a college council made up of doctors. These doctors get things put in front of them and say, you will sign this.
Yes.
Everything is a sham. Their college meetings are a sham, the college hearings are a sham. The tribunals that they're putting Dr. Charles Hoff through right now, Dr. Daniel Lagasse, those are pre-rigged shams. They've written the decision ahead of time. They're going to crucify these doctors, they're going to make examples out of them, and they're going to make sure that the other doctors in Canada keep their mouth shut and never speak up about COVID-19 vaccine issues. That's why they put in Bill 36 in British Columbia, where basically not only are they making COVID vaccination and other vaccinations mandatory as a condition of your medical license, as a condition of your nursing license, and you're going to take them whenever the government tells you to take them. If the government says you're going to take them every 3 months, you're going to take them every 3 months.
For now.
And they basically strongly recommend that healthcare professionals snitch on each other, report each other to the college, and for misinformation.
My sister phoned the cops on me.
Like, I don't get BC, why is nobody speaking up there?
Well,
To
Well, I
fool
mean,
somebody.
I'm sure
there is a pushback.
Yeah,
There's a pushback. I think a lot of doctors and nurses are panicking.
yeah,
Even the ones who are vaccinated and the ones who are fine with the vaccines,
yeah.
they're panicking. They don't know what to do. I've spoken to a lot of them. They are
But
panicking.
they bind together. That's the-
Yes,
How do we get rid of these colleges?
Yeah.
very easy. Getting rid of the college is one of the easiest things you can do.
Right.
Each province has a Health Professions Act, or a version of it. And the Health Professions Act regulates how medicine is practiced. So it actually constitutes the colleges of physicians, the colleges of nurses, the colleges of pharmacists, physiotherapists, what have you. I think there's something like 10 colleges. And what you do is you amend the Health Professions Act to dissolve the existing college.
Perfect.
So you'll help Mark with that on the True North Declaration?
Mark's on.
Yeah. So what you do is you amend the Health Professions Act, you dissolve the existing college, you then reconstitute. Now, you'd have to have an honest provincial government, not like the BC government. You'd have to have an honest provincial government to do that. You reconstitute a new medical board, and you put in all kinds of safeguards. You make it. First of all, it cannot be a private corporation. It cannot be run by lawyers, right? It's got to be a public entity. It's got to have oversight. It's got to have oversight from the Minister of Health. It's got to have oversight from the courts. It's got to have an independent third-party oversight for complaints and what have you. But you can do it. You can. A good lawyer can write up those amendments in a day. A government like the Alberta government, which has a majority, can pass that bill in a day or two. You do first reading, second reading, reading in committee, what have you. Boom, you can have it made law in 2 or 3 days. No one has the guts to do it.
What
Next
No one in
question,
Canada has
where do
the
you
guts
find
to
a
do it.
good lawyer?
No, but it has to come from the provincial government. Because, healthcare
I
is
know,
a
but-
provincial jurisdiction.
I think we'd have to first of all abolish
Find a good
our
lawyer.
legal system because
Yeah.
Again,
corrupt.
but you see, that's what they did with Bill 36, is they basically just put in an amended Health Professions Act, where the provincial government took more control and put in all kinds of totalitarian measures to basically silence the doctors and nurses. But that's how you do it, and you could do it in a day or two, and you would cut off so much power from the pharmaceutical industry and like with AHS, having connections with WEF and what have you. And then of course the college is the arm of the health authority, is the it's the iron arm that keeps doctors and nurses in check. You cut off that tentacle and you've taken a lot of power away. You need the political will, and no one has had the political will to do this in the last 40 years.
Did you say they got letters from the provincial health? Or did they get it from
No provincial colleges.
So it was the province that sent those letters out, not the
The-
Canadian?
The college,
The college.
the private corporation,
Nice.
that is the college.
So, yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
they are all beholden to the federal government. The colleges don't listen to the provincial government. Unless, again, in BC, the government's like, you know what, we gotta go more hardcore
No, yeah.
on the health professionals, so that they stepped in and they put in Bill 36, which is basically an amended Health Professions Act.
Well, so then what does the Canadian Medical Association do?
Not much. It's a
Are they
voluntary,
dictating anything?
no, it's a voluntary association, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a voluntary association that most, like, for example, I had a membership in the Alberta Medical Association, which gives you benefits like continuing medical education credits. You get $5,000 a year to take courses or go on conferences, whatever. And then they built in the Canadian Medical Association membership with it. It's like part of the membership package. So you get automatically. So if you go to the Alberta Medical Association, and there's a Saskatchewan Medical Association, for example, then you basically get enrolled into the federal structure of that, which is the Canadian Medical Association. But they have no power. They don't do anything. They don't do anything. I mean, they've been pushing vaccines on kids and pregnant women and what have you, but they don't do anything else.
They have no, okay, they have no plan.
Yeah.
Okay, American Frontline Doctors is coming up with like a parallel healthcare. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's called Gold Care Health and Wellness. Would that be a way out for Canada? Like, would we have some kind of?
If anyone tries that, they'll be arrested. And I'll tell you, the colleges have, it's built into the Health Professions Act that the colleges can get a court order to stop anyone from practicing without their license. That court order then can be enforced by the police. And you can get any clinic shut down. I'm telling you, the colleges are a source of a lot of evil. A lot of evil.
So we're stuck in a communist country.
Yeah, for now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
A little different flavor of the question, Doctor. Reference an interview you did with Laura Lynn, Tyler Thompson.
Yeah.
Specifically on Alberta and the data that was posted on government, and they were finding, I can't remember the date, if it was June or August of 2021 and into 2022, they discovered that the amount of people in the hospital due to vaccination was spiking like crazy.
It just kept going up and up and up. Yeah.
You were tracking it, and you found out they pulled it.
Yeah.
And Dina Henshaw was paid $200,000 bonus for doing that.
Yeah.
There's truth to that?
She was responsible for releasing the data came from Alberta Health Services, from AHS. They manipulated the data to make the vaccines look good. The data lands on her desk, and she was responsible, her office, they were responsible for putting that data, giving it out to Albertans, which they did through alberta.ca website. And yes, she's the one who pulled it, and she got a $230,000 bonus. And I'm saying it's because she basically covered up the fact that the vaccinated were having their immune systems damaged and destroyed. You know, they were getting injured, the government knew about it, they covered it up, they pulled the data when it looked bad, they rolled out the booster shots when they knew that the booster shots had failed in Israel several months before that, because Israel rolled out the booster shots. They were the first ones to roll out the booster shots, and then very shortly after they had the highest case rate of COVID-19 infections in the world.
Two more items.
Yeah.
In that interview, you alluded to a Wayback Machine.
Yeah, it's a website.
So it is a website?
It's a website. It's a website that goes and takes snapshots of other websites at a certain moment in time. I don't know how they do it, but and you can do this with any of the provincial websites that kept track of infection rates and hospitalizations and so on. You just go to the web, as long as you know the basic website, you can go to the Wayback Machine and you can actually track the data back to the start of the pandemic.
It seems there's a lot of data being pulled, so that would be very interesting.
It's still in the Wayback Machine for now. It might eventually be scrubbed from there too, but for now it's all there.
You can't get into it sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's tricky. It like crashed my computer many times.
They kick you out quite often.
Yeah.
And for interest's sake, do you know the role that Dina Henshaw now has in BC?
She's the deputy public health officer.
Alongside Bonnie Henry?
She is Bonnie Henry's deputy.
Oh my word.
Yeah. Exactly.
Put the two retards.
Sorry?
What is COVID in your opinion? So many people say that they have been weirdly sick from COVID.
What is COVID?
Some other people say COVID doesn't exist, it was just the regular flu. Other people say it's radiation. In your opinion, what was COVID or what is COVID?
To the best of my knowledge, and I'm always open to change if Commission. To the best of my knowledge, it is one of the most complex, engineered sequences, viral sequences, that's ever been seen. There is so much that is hidden in that sequence. In that, and especially in the spike protein sequence. I'm not referring to. It's like,
So the spike protein in COVID is not the same as the spike protein in the ducks, right?
I see it's the same.
Because you didn't see as many excess deaths
So-
from COVID as you do with the vaccines.
the vast majority of people are not getting the same spike protein sequence in their mRNA as was in the virus. I think Pfizer has a patent for over 100 different mutated forms of the spike protein. And that's what they're finding is someone went in and actually sequenced what people actually received and what spike protein they're making, and it's not nuts. In a lot of cases, it's not the spike protein of the virus. It is, they're calling it mutated versions of the spike protein, and no one knows what it's doing inside your system. Yeah, that's another big issue that's being sort of covered up.
I think if people are getting COVID and getting the shots, that's where they have trouble.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the spike protein is bad, whether you're getting it from COVID or whether you're getting it from the vaccine. It's just from the vaccine, you're getting that and a whole bunch of other stuff that we have no idea.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
then if
you're either getting the mutated spike protein and God knows what else is in those vials. I'll kind of leave it at that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, but
Because,
then if you end up getting COVID on top of that, which most of them are getting,
yeah, well, it seems to make things a lot worse.
well, and that's in his
Yeah.
case here.
Any other, yeah.
Do you have any hope or reason to believe that the spike proteins stop after a while, that people can get better, comes to an end?
There hasn't been any evidence that that you can get the spike protein out of your body. Let's say if you've had the vaccine, but again, it's like it's very hard to test for that, right? And Dr. Peter McCullough often talks about how long does the spike protein, how long is it detectable in the bloodstream and so on, right? And in some people, it seems to be detectable for months, right? In the blood.
So the bodies are just generated for years?
Just a comment on this, the spike protein is the most pathologic, disease-causing protein in the COVID virus.
Yeah.
There are some 80 other proteins in the virus that are not present in the Franken injection that they're giving you.
The spike protein is an absolute monstrosity.
Yeah,
The things that are, I mean, there's amyloid sequences in there, there's prion sequences, there's homology to all kinds of proteins in your body, which basically creates autoimmune diseases once you put it in your body.
This is why the analogy to snake venom is made.
Yeah.
Because they've taken the most poisonous part of COVID and they have turned that into a bioweapon, which is basically what the vaccine is.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So don't be surprised. You're better off getting COVID than you are getting the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? Okay.
I was reading recently that I'm just curious, you want to have doctors that can work at any cost. So would that bill security affect all of them?
So, what's going to happen is eventually the Canadian government is going to come out and say we're going to do a pan-Canadian license, so that and they're going to bill it as other doctors can work anywhere in Canada. But what's going to happen is that they're going to control the licenses of all the doctors in Canada, and it's going to be in an office in Ottawa. So I believe they will eventually just take it from the province's hands. Well, I mean, the colleges are corrupt anyways, but they're going to take it from the college's hands. They're going to say it's a pan-Canadian license. We'll have doctors filling needs all over Canada. They'll release it as a good thing. The CMA, the Canadian Medical Association, is actually pushing for this, and they are a branch of the Liberal government. I mean, the former CMA president, Dr. Gigi Osler, president 2018 to 19, was just appointed by Trudeau to the Canadian Senate. That's how close these associations are to the Liberal government. And so they talked about make a pan-Canadian license, and they will control it from an office in Ottawa. And if you step out of line, they'll turn off your license like this, and you won't be able to practice in Canada anymore.
Now, that's
That's
including
funny.
chiropractors too?
I don't know. I think they'll start with the doctors, and then maybe they'll move on to nurses. And
Well, that's likely why a friend of mine who lives half year in Mexico was flying there at the beginning of winter. Somebody had a heart attack. They asked if there was a doctor on the plane. More than 3/4 of the plane put their hand up. Everybody is leaving this country.
Well, you know, if the BC is any indication, they're going to have a huge exodus of healthcare workers. Yeah. Yes.
Do you believe the blood supply is tainted?
Oh, good question.
Oh, yeah.
What's the question?
Blood supply, paid.
You know, that's a tough one. I wouldn't want, let me put it this way, I would not want transfusion of vaccinated blood
No.
at all. But you don't have a choice, and they're not labeling it.
Yeah.
And if you're in a life and death situation, what are you going to choose? You don't have a choice. They don't give you the choice.
Well, I did ask. I called Canada Blood Services back probably a year or so ago because I was curious about this, and they said that they're accepting every blood from unvaccinated and vaccinated. So
And they're not labeling.
yeah,
They're not saying vaccinated, unvaccinated. So,
You
you
can
know,
bet your
you
ass.
basically, if you're in a life and death situation, you have to take it, and you're basically taking a chance.
and you're also not allowed to store your blood for more than 6 months, and it's only for severe cases. If you are someone that is unvaccinated wanting to store blood for other people.
But you can't.
Yeah.
So once we get Mark elected, can we count on you for the Nuremberg trials?
Woo!
Honestly, I stay away from the Nuremberg talk for a reason, because I want to stay out of jail.
They've broken all of them.
I don't want them to have an excuse to throw me in jail.
They've broken
I
all
know. I don't even know where we begin with because there's so many people that deserve criminal charges.
How about chief medical officer?
Oh, that's a good start. That's a good start. But, you know, the heads of the colleges, the heads of the health authorities, there's a lot of guilt. to go
Anyone
around.
knowingly that hurt humanity.
A lot of guilt to go around.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what's hard to imagine. Like, there's so many people that are responsible for
Yeah, a lot of people have their hands dirty.
We'll get every last one of them.
They live with themselves.
We'll get every last
And
one.
then imagine the doctors. Imagine a doctor that has a practice of 1,000 patients, or a family doctor, and they recommend it to everybody,
Oh, I can't
right?
believe.
And then now the patients are coming back saying, hey, wait a minute, you told me this was safe
Yeah.
and effective, right? And you didn't tell me about these risks, neurological injuries, cardiac injuries, what have you. It's gonna be, I'm not looking forward
You know what? I
to,
think there'll be a lot of suicides.
I'm not looking forward to what's coming. I'm really not. And I know this is meant to be hopeful, but we're in for some real chaos. Yeah.
That's why they're pushing MAID, and now obituaries are listing MAID as the cause of death.
They're pushing MAID, and my feeling was that the vaccine, the severely vaccine injured, will be offered MAID as their number one solution.
Yeah.
And they're expanding MAID to kids.
Yeah.
That was tabled last month.
It's
They
disgusting.
will be expanding it to mature minors.
Without parental consent.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, with each vaccine, are they all the same? Like when you get the first, the second,
No.
the booster?
So, the first and the second are supposed to be the same. The booster, I think the Moderna dose is different, but you are getting a completely different product each time. The batches are all different. There's huge variability in the batches. The way they mass produce these things, it basically, you get a whole host of, variability. And people have tracked it on the howbadismybatch.com, and you can track the serial numbers and see, okay, this is one of the lethal batches, and this one doesn't do anything, this one has no lethality. you're getting a different product every time, and you have no idea what you're getting.
I think they do know batches though, because we have
Well,
an Indian
okay.
reserve 90 minutes out of town. One of our freedom fighters called me, her brother got it, was dead 4 hours later. Her second brother that got it that day was dead 9 days later, and her sister was dead 5 weeks later. She lost 3 people in about a 6.5 week period. And that was all from an Indian reserve up by Prince Albert.
Wow. There's a good chance that maybe someone is tracking the side effects of the batches, but they're simply not telling us.
I
Yeah.
think there's geographic.
Yeah.
We got time for 2 more.
Okay,
I just wanna thank you for your courage.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thanks everybody. That's gonna end the program for tonight. They're gonna kick us out in very soon. So, yeah, make sure everything is taken with you, papers and all that sort of stuff. And to those that came early and paid $20, see Donna.